He was the very picture of a disciplined K-9 officer, but on that sun-drenched afternoon, Bolt shattered every rule forsaking his post by the cruiser. The magnificent German shepherd hurled his body against the kitchen door, his claws tearing at the wood in a desperate, frantic plea to get inside. Mark believed his wife and children were away at a luxury retreat. But the moment he broke the door open, a gut-wrenching stench of neglect was the first thing to assault him. There, in the heart of their home beneath the gleaming marble island, his precious children were shackled to the plumbing like forgotten animals. Shivering in the oppressive darkness, they were forced to eat cold scraps from the filthy floor just to stay alive. The sight shattered Mark, and he collapsed to his knees in pure agony, his world imploding. And just moments later, their stepmother glided in, humming a cheerful tune and clutching a designer handbag. She was completely oblivious that her picture-perfect lie was about to be ripped to shreds by 90 pounds of righteous fury. This is a story of unimaginable betrayal, a breathtaking rescue, and the unyielding justice delivered by a father and his loyal dog. Before we witness the reckoning, let us know where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. And if you believe that true evil must face its consequences, hit that subscribe button, because today justice is being served. The morning sun poured over the pristine lawns of Oakwood Hills, a warm, golden embrace, whispering promises of perfect serenity. It was a rare spring day, the air holding a crispness at 18 degrees Celsius, yet the sunlight felt like a tender caress against the skin. Here in this tranquil Seattle suburb, where hydrangeas exploded in vibrant blues and violets against a backdrop of white picket fences, the world felt profoundly at peace. But even the brightest sun can cast the deepest, most terrifying shadows in places you would never dare to look. Mark stood beside the open trunk of his black SUV, its polished metal gleaming under a vast azure sky. At 40 years old, Mark was a man forged from solid oak and unshakable discipline. A K-9 police sergeant, his face was etched with the lines of a man who had stared into the very worst of humanity. And yet his eyes, the color of faded denim, held an immense tenderness whenever his gaze fell upon his family. He adjusted his tactical bag, his hands moving over the gear with the ingrained muscle memory of a seasoned veteran. "You ready, buddy?" Mark asked, glancing down at his partner. Beside him sat Bolt, a truly magnificent German shepherd, whose black and tan coat shone like polished mahogany. Bolt was more than just a dog. He was Mark's shadow, his steadfast partner, his silent confidant. The shepherd's ears twitched, his amber eyes sweeping the street with an intelligence that felt profoundly human. A low whine rumbled in Bolt's throat. As he nudged Mark's hand with his wet nose, a clear sense of unease about the coming departure. Ordinarily, the prospect of joining Mark on a training mission for new recruits in a neighboring state would have thrilled the dog. But not today. Bolt's powerful tail remained motionless. 2 weeks, Lana. Are you absolutely sure you can manage everything by yourself? Mark asked, turning toward the porch, his voice threaded with the worry of a man who loved with his whole heart. Lana stood perfectly framed between the white pillars of their home, appearing for all the world like a flawless vision of suburban perfection. She was 32, with waves of blonde hair that captured the sunlight, and a smile so practiced it seemed sculpted from ice. She was dressed in a floral sundress that danced in the breeze, and the cloying scent of expensive vanilla perfume wafted from her, a deliberate mask for the chilling coldness that lay just beneath her porcelain facade. "Oh, Mark, don't be such a worrier," Lana laughed, the sound as bright and hollow as wind chimes. She descended the steps, her heels striking the pavement with a sharp, rhythmic click. "The children won't be underfoot, I promise. Their junior baker's camp begins this very afternoon. Just look." For the third time that morning, she pressed a slick, colorful brochure into his hands. It painted a picture of joyful children in crisp white chef hats, dusted with flour, their faces beaming against a backdrop of idyllic green hills. "Sugar Plum Creek," it read, "where memories are baked with love." It's a very exclusive boarding program, Mark. Lana continued, her hand tracing the lapel of his suit jacket. Ben adores chocolate. And Mia, nerd. Well, she has a gift for making a glorious mess. They'll learn about structure, self-reliance, and baking. It's truly perfect for them. And it gives me the space I need to get the house completely reorganized before you return. Mark's eyes fell to the brochure, then lifted to his wife. A desperate part of him yearned to believe in that perfect picture. After his first wife was taken from him, leaving him with an infant and a toddler, Mark felt himself drowning in a sea of grief. Finding Lana had felt like a hand pulling him back to the surface, a lifeline he couldn't afford to let go of. So he silenced the insistent whisper in his mind that questioned why the tuition was paid in cash, or why the camp lacked so much as a website, boasting only a private, unlisted phone number. He buried his instincts for one simple reason: he desperately wanted his children to have a mother. Okay, Mark finally sighed, a weary smile finally breaking through his beard. You are incredible, you know that. Thank you for putting this all together. Anything for our family, Lana cooed, turning her perfect smile toward the house. Ben, Mia, come and say goodbye to Daddy. The front door groaned open, and two tiny figures stepped into the harsh morning sun. Ben, only 5 years old, moved with a fragile hesitation that was devastating to see in a child so young. He had his father's dark, troubled hair and his same sensitive eyes. But his small shoulders were already hunched as if perpetually bracing for an unseen blow. Clinging to his hand was Mia, just 2 years old, a little cherub with wild curls, a thumb sealed in her mouth. She toddled beside her brother, her free hand desperately clutching the hem of his t-shirt. They didn't run to their father. They walked. Mark knelt on the cold concrete of the driveway, his arms stretched wide. Come here. You two! Mia stumbled into his embrace first, her hair smelling of baby shampoo and sweet milk. Mark buried his face in her soft curls, inhaling the innocent scent that was his anchor to this world. Ben followed, but his hug was rigid and fragile. His small frame trembled against his father's chest, vibrating with the tension of a wire stretched to its breaking point. Hey, big guy, Mark whispered gently, pulling back to look into his son's eyes. What's with the long face? You're off to camp? You're going to bake some cookies for your old man, right? Ben offered no reply. His gaze flickered past his father's shoulder to where Lana stood only a few feet away. The smile was still fixed upon her face, but her eyes were cold and hard as stone. Ben, Mark prompted, softly cupping his son's small face. What is it? What's wrong? Ben's mouth fell open. His lower lip trembled. A silent scream was trapped in his throat. He wanted to tell his dad that there was no camp. He yearned to tell him about the way Lana's fingers would pinch their skin when Mark's back was turned, how their crayon drawings always vanished into the trash. But just as he drew a breath to speak, a hand descended upon his shoulder. It was Lana's. Her perfectly manicured fingers dug into the tender flesh of his neck. To Mark, it was a comforting, motherly touch. To Ben, it was a vice, a sharp, silent command that burned through his skin. Silence. He's just a little nervous, honey. Lana said, her voice a river of sweet poison. Her grip tightened. Ben flinched, a movement so slight it was almost invisible. He's never been away from home. It's just a little separation anxiety. Mark nodded, accepting the comforting lie over a terrifying truth. He rose to his feet, ruffling Ben's hair. You be a brave boy, Ben. Watch over your sister. You're the man of the house while I'm away. The man of the house. A title whose weight nearly crushed the 5-year-old boy. I will, Daddy. Ben breathed, his small voice a mere whisper, nearly lost in the cheerful chorus of robins in the great oak trees. That's my boy. Mark leaned in, placing a tender kiss on Lana's cheek. I'll call you tonight once we're settled at the hotel. Drive safe, darling, Lana replied, her hand raised in a delicate wave. Mark let out a sharp whistle, and Bolt leaped into the passenger seat of the SUV, but the dog hesitated, his loyal eyes turning back to the children. Bolt released a sharp, uneasy bark, his gaze locked onto Lana with an unnerving intensity. "Quiet, Bolt," Mark commanded, though a flicker of confusion creased his brow. "Load up." With a final parting wave, Mark slid behind the wheel. The engine ignited with a roar tearing through the tranquil morning air. The black SUV glided down the long driveway, turning the corner swallowed from sight by a wall of pristine hedges. In that instant, the very air on the driveway grew cold. It was as if the sun itself had been snuffed out, plunged into a sudden chilling eclipse. The warmth seemed to bleed from the world. Even the birds fell silent. Lana remained frozen on the concrete, her eyes fixed on the empty street, waiting a long moment to be certain he was truly gone. Then slowly her shoulders sagged, but it was not with relief, with her entire demeanor transformed the loving wife, dissolving into something cold, rigid, and predatory. Her gaze fell upon the two small children standing on the cold concrete. The smile was erased from her face, as if scrubbed away by a dirty rag, leaving behind a mask of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Stop your crying," she hissed, her voice venomous, directed at Mia's soft whimper. We go to camp now?" Mia asked, pulling her thumb from her mouth, her eyes vast pools of innocence. Lana let out a laugh, but it was no longer the sound of gentle wind chimes. It was a brittle, hollow sound, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. "Camp, you foolish little thing. There is no camp." A sharp gasp escaped Ben's lips as he instinctively moved to shield Mia. He knew. Deep down, he had always known. "Get inside," Lana commanded, her voice a low, menacing growl. "Now." She didn't wait for them to comply. Her arm shot out, her long fingers closing around Ben's upper arm, like a vice, her nails digging into his flesh without a trace of mercy. With her other hand, she seized Mia's tiny wrist. She didn't lead them. She dragged them. "Ow, you're hurting me," Ben cried, his small shoes scraping helplessly against the perfect stone walkway. "Be quiet," Lana snarled. She hauled them up the porch steps and violently shoved them through the front door. Inside the house was cool and dark, the heavy drapes pulled shut against the morning sun. But Lana didn't stop in the foyer. She marched them down the long hallway past a gallery of smiling family photos that now screamed of a terrible lie, and straight into the kitchen. It was a gourmet kitchen, a shrine to modern design with its gleaming white marble countertops and cold stainless steel appliances, and a massive center island, a space built for warm family gatherings, for Sunday morning pancakes, for echoes of laughter. "Sit," Lana commanded, pointing a single sharp finger at the cold tile floor under the shadow of the kitchen island. Utterly terrified, the children sank to the floor, huddling together for warmth. Ben wrapped his protective arms around Mia, whose fear was turning into a heartbreaking wail. Lana strode to a drawer by the sink. The sharp sound of metal striking metal echoed unnervingly through the silent house. When she finally turned back to face them, she wasn't holding a kitchen utensil. She was holding chains. They were thin, yet powerful, the kind meant for restraining large, powerful dogs, their links cold and heavy in her hands. She had hired a handyman just 2 days ago, spinning a tale about needing secure anchors under the island to protect a priceless wine collection during a party. The unsuspecting handyman had installed heavy-duty steel loops, bolting them deep into the plumbing infrastructure, blindly obeying the strange command from the beautiful, wealthy woman. "You two are such a burden," Lana muttered, sinking down to their level. Her heavy perfume suffocated the air around them. "You're so noisy and you're always a mess, and you devour all of his time. But for the next 2 weeks, I am finally going to have some peace." Ben desperately tried to scramble away, his small sneaker sliding uselessly on the gleaming tile. "No, I want Daddy. I want Bolt." Lana's hand cracked across his face. It was a sharp, stinging blow that left the room in a ringing silence. Mia screamed. "Daddy isn't here," Lana whispered, her face mere inches from Ben's, her eyes a cold, empty void. "And he is not coming back for a very, very long time." With a chilling, practiced efficiency, she wrapped the cold chains around their tiny ankles. The snap of the padlocks locking shut echoed like a gunshot in the silent kitchen. Ben pulled at his leg, but the chain held him fast. He stared up at the vast expanse of white marble above him, then to a single sliver of sunlight fighting its way through the blinds. He was trapped. Lana rose, brushing her hands together, as if she had just finished a simple household chore. She looked down on them, two small prisoners in the sanctuary of their own home, and smiled. It was the first truly genuine smile she had shown them all day. The silence that fell after the locks clicked was heavier than the chains themselves. It was a thick, suffocating blanket of dread that settled over the kitchen, pierced only by the indifferent hum of the stainless steel refrigerator. A machine full of food, cool and fresh, just 10 feet away, yet as unreachable as the stars in the night sky. Ben sat on the frigid porcelain floor, hugging his knees tightly to his chest. The metal cuff around his ankle was a band of ice, biting into his soft skin right above the bone. He gave it an experimental tug, a gentle pull at first, and then harder. The chain rattled a harsh, serpentine hiss that bounced off the cold, white marble cabinets. It held firm. The other end was anchored invisibly to the plumbing beneath the massive island, a dark cavern of pipes and shadow. The kitchen, which had always been the warm heart of their home, where the sweet smell of pancakes would dance on Sunday mornings, had been defiled. It was no longer a room. It was now a vast, frozen tundra of white stone and gleaming surfaces. To a 5-year-old boy, the countertops towered like sheer cliffs, and the island above was an imposing mountain blotting out the sky. Lana moved at the edges of their vision, a fleeting blur of a floral dress and unspeakable cruelty. She was humming a quiet, cheerful tune, the very one she sang when she was arranging fresh-cut flowers. The jarring contrast between her gentle melody and her monstrous actions made Ben's stomach clench. "We can't have anyone peeking in, can we?" Lana mused. Though she wasn't talking to the children, she was speaking to the room, to her own reflection in the darkening window pane. She pulled a roll of heavy-duty black duct tape from a drawer. With a terrifying precision, she began to seal their world away. A Zipatera press. She began covering the large bay windows that looked out upon the side garden. Strip by agonizing strip, the beautiful spring day was systematically erased. The vibrant greens of the bushes and the soft blue of the sky were swallowed by blackness. However, she did not seal the window completely, whether from a twisted sense of mercy or a subconscious wish to torment them with a glimpse of all they had lost. She left a single narrow slit at the bottom of the central pane, a gap no wider than a finger. "There," she said, stepping back to admire her cruel handiwork. The kitchen was now swallowed by a twilight gloom, the under-cabinet lighting she'd just extinguished, leaving an aching void. Only a lifeless gray light filtered through the tape. She crossed to the far corner of the room and picked up a plastic object. It was a red bowl, scarred and faded with time. Ben knew it in an instant. It was the old travel bowl they always used for Bolt on their long hikes. The faint scent of old kibble and trail dust still clung to it. Lana strode to the sink, filling the bowl with lukewarm water from the tap. She didn't bother letting the water run cold. She simply filled it and carried it over to where the children were chained. She placed the bowl on the floor just at the edge of their chain's reach. "Hydration is important," she stated, her voice utterly empty of warmth. Clinical, detached. "You two will have to share. Consider this a lesson in cooperation." Ben stared at the bowl. The humiliation was a physical blow. It was a bowl for an animal, not for a child. But the dryness in his throat was already beginning to burn. "Please! Mommy! Lana!" Mia whimpered, her voice tiny and trembling. She tugged on Ben's shirt. "I want my cup. The pink one." Lana paid her no mind. She checked her reflection in the dark glass of the oven, smoothing her hair and adjusting a diamond earring. She snatched her designer handbag from the granite counter. "I have a charity luncheon at the club," she announced, as if speaking to a husband who wasn't there. "I'll be back late. Don't make a sound. If the neighbors hear you—" "Well, you know what happens in the dark cellar, don't you, Ben?" Ben nodded frantically, his eyes stretched wide with pure terror. The cellar was a place of spiders and suffocating darkness, a threat she had whispered about for months. Good boy. The sharp click of her heels on the hardwood floor was a steady countdown to their abandonment. Then came the creak of the front door opening, the heavy thud of it closing, and the final metallic slide of the deadbolt locking them in. They were utterly alone. For what felt like an eternity, neither child moved. The house settled around them, its creaks and groans amplified in the emptiness. The silence was absolute, magnifying the sound of their own ragged breaths. As the afternoon slowly bled away, the sun began its descent. The sliver of light piercing the black tape on the window started to creep across the floor. It was a concentrated beam, alive with golden dust motes, a single laser of pure, warm sunshine slicing through the gloom of their prison. It crawled across the tile inch by agonizing inch, like the hand of a silent clock. Ben watched, mesmerized. It looked so warm. The cold floor beneath him was stealing the warmth from his body, making his very bones ache. He yearned for that single touch of sun. He stretched his leg out, straining against the cold metal cuff. The chain pulled taut, biting cruelly into his skin. He reached with his hand, fingers splayed wide, desperately trying to touch the pool of light. It was 3 inches beyond his grasp. The light danced there, illuminating a single speck of dust on the floor, mocking him. It was a painful reminder of the world just outside, a world of bikes and ice cream and squirrels that Bolt loved to chase. It was freedom, and he was chained to the dark. Beside him, Mia stirred. The 2-year-old had cried herself into a restless sleep, curled in a tight ball against Ben's side, like a frightened kitten. Now she was waking, her face flushed and sticky with dried tears. "Ben! Ben!" she rasped, her voice strained. Her voice was as scratchy as sandpaper. Thirsty. Ben looked at his little sister. Her lips were dry and splitting. The oppressive heat in the kitchen was building. The black tape on the windows absorbed the sun's heat, turning the sealed room into a suffocating greenhouse. The air was stale and heavy. "It's okay, Mia, okay." Ben whispered, the sharp clank of the chain echoing as he moved. His eyes found the red dog bowl. It sat at the edge of their small world, the water inside of it, still and stagnant. "I want juice," Mia whimpered, rubbing her eyes. "A juice box." "We don't have any juice, Mia," Ben said, his voice carrying a weight far beyond his 5 years. He felt the heavy burden of responsibility settling on his small shoulders. With Daddy gone, he was more than her brother now. He was her protector. He started crawling toward the bowl. The chain pulled taut against his ankle, jerking him to a halt. He had to lie flat, stretching his small body as far as it could possibly go. "Come here, Mia," he urged softly. Mia just shook her head. She was afraid of the bowl. She was afraid of the floor. She wanted her high chair. "I can't reach you if you stay over there," Ben pleaded, a knot of panic tightening in his chest. "You have to come to the water." Mia crept over the crinkle of her diaper, a lonely sound in the silent room. She looked down into the dog bowl and scrunched up her nose. "Yucky." "It's not yucky," Ben lied, a forced smile never reaching his eyes. It's a magic pool from a fairy tale." Mia looked at him, her eyes a mixture of skepticism and desperation. She tried to lean down and drink like a kitten, but she didn't know how. She only managed to dip her chin in, sputtering and coughing as water shot up her nose. She recoiled, wailing, "No, no, help me!" Ben's heart shattered. He sat up, ignoring the pain. He stared down at his small, grimy hands that should have been holding a toy rocket ship. "Come here." "Mia, sit on my knees." He pulled her into his lap. He leaned forward again, the chain groaning as it stretched to its very limit. He dipped his cupped hand into the red bowl. The water was tepid and had a faint taste of plastic. But to Ben, it was everything. He brought his hand to Mia's lips. "Drink, Mia, like a little bird." She opened her mouth and sipped from his hand. Water trickled down her chin and onto his arm, but she swallowed it down. She drank with a desperate thirst, her tiny hands clutching his wrist to hold it steady. Ben dipped his hand into the bowl again and again and again. He was a one-boy rescue mission. His back ached from the impossible angle. His knees were raw from the unforgiving tile, but he never stopped, not until Mia sighed and leaned her head against his chest, her thirst finally gone. "Story?" Mia whispered, her eyes heavy again. The sheer exhaustion of their trauma was pulling her back down. Ben looked at the thin line of light, which had now crept further away, fading into a deep, dull orange as evening fell. He thought of Bolt. He missed his dog so much it felt like an empty hole in his chest. "Once upon a time," Ben whispered into Mia's hair, rocking her gently, "there was a magic wolf named Bolt. He was big and black and gold, just like a king." "Bolt," Mia mumbled sleepily. "Yeah, Bolt. Bolt is on a quest." Ben continued, his voice wavering just a little. "He's running through the deep woods right this second. He's running so fast all the trees are a blur. He's sniffing the wind. He's searching for us." "Is he coming?" Mia asked. "He's coming," Ben promised her, as a single tear escaped, tracing a clean line through the grime on his cheek. "He's got a super nose. He can smell us right through the tape, right through the dark. He's going to come and chew off the chains and take us to the park." "And Daddy, Ben's voice cracked. "Daddy's riding on his back." A faint, fleeting smile graced Mia's lips as she closed her eyes. Ben remained vigilant in the deepening shadows, the grit of dust coating his tongue, refusing to touch the water himself. So little remained in the bowl, and he had no idea when the monster they called Lana would return to replenish it. He wrapped himself around his sister, a living shield against the creeping cold and the terror that filled the air. Then the final sliver of light was devoured by the night, and the kitchen was plunged into absolute blackness. The only sound was their shared breaths and the soft metallic whisper of a chain shifting in the void. Time had ceased to exist inside their white marble tomb. With no clocks to mark the hours, only a creeping sliver of sunlight across the floor proved the world outside still turned. 5 days had crawled by. For the rest of the world, 5 days was just a work week, a blur of coffee runs, traffic jams, and nightly news. For Ben and Mia, 5 days was an eternity, carved from hunger and the slow, agonizing decay of hope. The once pristine kitchen, a perfect picture from a magazine, had devolved into a foul prison. The air trapped by sealed doors and black tape had become heavy and stagnant, thick with the sour scent of unwashed bodies and the sharp tang of their desperation. They had been forced to use a corner of their small world, a humiliation that brought silent tears to Ben's eyes, while Mia simply drifted away from it all. Late in the evening, the lock turned. That sound no longer meant rescue. It meant intrusion. Lana swept in, and with her a blast of cool, fresh air that smelled of rain and of a freedom they couldn't have. It washed over Ben's face, a cruel reminder of the world just past the door. She wore a sleek, black trench coat, her hair perfectly in place, her lips a slash of deep crimson. She was a goddess of the night, completely untouched by the filth she had orchestrated. She refused to look at them. To do so would be to see them as human, and Lana had already decided they were just a problem to be managed like a leaky faucet or a stain on the rug. She held a plastic grocery bag, but it held no promise of fresh food or a warm meal. She strode to the invisible boundary, the very edge of their chains, and stopped cold. She would not step any closer. The stench repelled her. "Disgusting," she whispered, her nose wrinkling. "Animals have it better." From the bag, she produced a package of hot dogs, the cheapest kind, with their artificial bright pink processed meat, sealed in plastic slick with condensation. She made no move toward the pantry. She didn't bother with a plate. With a flick of her wrist, she ripped the package open and tossed the cold, slimy sausages onto the floor. They hit the tiles with a wet smack, rolling through the accumulated dust and filth, finally stopping near the water bowl, now cloudy with grime and debris. "Eat," she ordered, wiping her fingers on a paper towel from her pocket, then casually dropping it to the floor with the rest of the trash. "I can't have you starving before he returns. It would be too complicated to explain." Then she turned on her heel and was gone. The deadbolt shot home a final punctuation to her utter indifference. Ben could only stare at the food. His stomach screamed, a raw hunger so sharp it felt like claws were tearing him apart from the inside. But the food discarded on the filthy floor, where they had collapsed in exhaustion and sorrow, churned a different kind of sickness deep within him. Hundreds of miles away, in a faceless hotel room painted beige and taupe, Mark sat hunched on the bed's edge as a ceaseless rain wept against the window pane, smearing the city lights into abstract ribbons of neon. He cradled his phone, his thumb hovering over the call icon. A bone-deep exhaustion had settled in. The training had been a brutal, physically punishing ordeal, chasing shadows through dense wilderness, yet that ache in his muscles was nothing to the cavernous emptiness in his heart. "Hey, pal," Mark whispered to Bolt. "Let's call Mom. Maybe we can catch the kids before they turn in." Bolt lay sprawled on the worn carpet, his head resting on his paws. At the word Mom, the magnificent dog's ears twitched, but his head remained heavy. A deep and resonant vibration started in his chest. It wasn't a growl, but a low rumble of profound disquiet. The call went through the screen, a flickering, pixelated mess. "Mark, darling." Lana's face materialized, cast in soft, dim lighting, a flattering glow that masked the steel behind her eyes. "How are you? We miss you terribly." "I miss you too," Mark breathed, his voice raw with longing. "How are they? How's camp?" "Oh, it's just wonderful," Lana cooed. "But the service out at Sugar Plum Creek is just awful. They have a strict no-phone rule for the kids you know to encourage mindfulness. It's very progressive. Can I just see them just for a second?" Mark begged. "I haven't heard their voices in 5 days, Lana. I just need to know they're all right." "I tried to get a video for you," Lana said, her face molding into a well-rehearsed mask of sympathy. "The connection was just impossible, but I did download a clip the counselor sent over this morning. Here." She angled her phone toward her laptop's camera. On the screen within a screen, a silent video began to play. It showed Ben and Mia laughing as they ran across a sun-drenched lawn. The audio was just a rush of wind and far-off shouts. "See?" Lana chirped. "Happy as can be." Mark squinted the video, a blurry mess its quality destroyed by the weak signal. They look great. Is Ben wearing his blue shirt? I thought we packed the red one." "Oh, they gave them camp t-shirts," Lana said quickly. A little too quickly. "Listen, the signal's breaking up. I have to go, honey. I love you." The screen went dead before Mark could ask why the trees in the background were full summer oaks, not the saplings of spring. He let out a heavy sigh, letting the phone fall to the comforter. A strange knot tightened in his gut, a discord he couldn't quite place. He glanced down at Bolt. The German Shepherd was on his feet, his gaze locked on the dark, empty phone screen, the hackles along his spine raised in a stiff, angry ridge. A sharp, high-pitched whine escaped him as he paced frantically to the door and back, his claws scratching at the carpet. "What is it, boy?" Mark asked, reaching out to soothe the dog's powerful head. "You miss them too, don't you?" Bolt shoved Mark's hand away with a forceful nudge of his nose, then stared him straight in the eye. His amber gaze was intense, piercing, and desperate. Animals sense the world on frequencies that humans have long forgotten how to hear. Bolt hadn't heard a loving wife. He had heard the subtle pitch of a lie, the faint tremor of a predator covering its trail. He knew his pack was fractured. He knew the young ones were in peril. But Mark, blinded by love and separated by miles, just gave his head a reassuring pat. "We're coming home, Bolt. Just one more week." But back in the kitchen, the night had ushered in a bitter, encroaching cold. A fever was consuming Mia. She lay coiled on the threadbare rug, her small body racked by violent tremors. Her skin was a clammy ashen gray, yet a frightening heat radiated from her forehead. The foul odor in the room had grown heavier, more suffocating. The unsanitary conditions and the tainted water had finally exacted their terrible price. Mia had been sick just hours before her body rejecting the foul water, leaving her perilously dehydrated and weak. "Mommy, Mia whimpered, her eyes half-lidded, glazed over and lost. "Mommy, it hurts." "I know, sweet girl, I know." Ben whispered, his own body shivering in a thin t-shirt. He had pulled off his own socks to cover her tiny hands, a desperate attempt to keep her warm, leaving his own feet bare against the ice-cold tile. His gaze fell upon the hot dogs scattered on the floor. They were cold to the touch, coated in dust, and the grime from the unmopped floor. To Ben, a boy raised to wash his hands before dinner, and to say grace eating food from the floor was an unthinkable act. It was something an animal would do. But Mia was fading away before his eyes. He could see the shadows deepening in the hollows of her cheeks. Ben crawled toward the nearest hot dog, his own stomach twisting into a knot so tight he almost doubled over in pain. He reached out and his fingers closed around the piece of meat. It felt slick, coated in a layer of gray lint. He looked at his own shirt. It was stained and filthy, but it was the cleanest thing he owned. With trembling hands, Ben began to clean the hot dog. He rubbed it with a desperate fervor against his shoulder, trying to scrape away the grime, the hair, the unbearable shame of it all. He meticulously picked off a piece of fluff with his fingernail. He polished the cheap processed meat until it was as clean as his love could make it. He crept back to Mia's side. "Mia," he whispered, his voice fracturing. "Mia, wake up," she moaned softly, turning her head away. "No, Yucky." "It's not Yucky," Ben lied, the tears he'd held back finally spilling down his cheeks. It's a special sausage from a campfire. Daddy sent it." At the sound of the word, Daddy, Mia's eyes fluttered open. "Daddy?" "Yes," Ben choked out, breaking off a small piece of the cold meat. "Daddy wants you to eat so you can get big and strong for when he comes home." He gently pressed the piece of food to her lips. Mia hesitated for a heartbeat, then slowly opened her mouth. She chewed with a painful slowness. Ben watched her, his own hunger, a roaring monster inside him that he beat back with the sheer force of his will. He fed her another piece, and then another. He ate only the ends, the parts most contaminated by the floor, the pieces he could never truly get clean. He ate the dirt so that she would not have to. "You're such a good girl, Mia," Ben soothed, stroking her hair now matted with sweat. "You just wait. Bolt is running. I can almost hear him. Can you hear him?" Mia swallowed the final piece. She looked up at Ben with eyes that seemed far too old, far too weary for a 2-year-old. "I hear him," she whispered, her own lie offered as comfort to her brave brother. Ben pulled her close, wrapping his bony arms around her feverish frame. In the oppressive darkness of the kitchen, surrounded by the stench of neglect, the 5-year-old boy stared at the locked kitchen door with a resolve that was hardening into steel. He was no longer just waiting for his father. He was holding a sacred vigil. And in his heart, the image of his father was more than just a memory. It was the only prayer he had left. The mission had concluded, ahead of schedule, a stroke of fortune that felt like a gift from the universe itself. The final tracking exercise had been shattered in record time, and the commanding officer, a man notoriously sparing with his praise, had actually cracked a smile, had simply met Mark and Bolt's gaze, then nodded. "Go home, Sergeant, you've earned it." Home. That one word was like honey on Mark's tongue, as he guided the black SUV through the familiar streets of his neighborhood. It was the middle of a Tuesday, and the world seemed to be wearing its very best spring colors. The temperature held steady at a perfect 20 degrees Celsius, a true Goldilocks day, where the sun was just warm enough to chase away the chill, yet the breeze was cool enough to soothe the soul. The sky was a vast, flawless canvas of the deepest blue, the kind of sky that makes you feel like nothing bad could ever happen beneath it. Mark turned the wheel, but instead of pulling into his own driveway, he let the car glide to a stop at the curb 2 houses away. He cut the engine, allowing a profound silence to fill the space. "All right, we're going in quiet, Bolt," Mark whispered, a boyish grin stretching across his face. "Let's surprise him." He could already picture it, Lana maybe in the garden, tending to her roses, her head snapping up in disbelief as he walked through the door. The kids? If they were home from camp early, a secret, desperate hope he held on to. They'd come rushing him with their sticky hands and joyful screams. He reached into the back seat and pulled out 2 brightly colored Oreo boxes. For Ben, a Galactic Voyager Lego set a complex spaceship with 1,000 pieces he knew they'd spend hours putting together. And for Mia, a lullaby. Lola, a sweet doll with yarn hair that sang nursery rhymes when you gave her tummy a little squeeze. Mark climbed out of the SUV, shifting the boxes under his left arm. He drew in a long, deep breath, savoring the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming jasmine. "Come on, boy, let's go home." Bolt launched himself from the car, but he didn't land with his usual joyful spring. Typically, the moment he knew they were home, the 90-pound German Shepherd would erupt into a happy dance, a blur of excited spins and whines, his tail beating a frantic rhythm of pure joy. But today, Bolt hit the pavement with a heavy, solid thud. His tail didn't wag. He didn't spin. Mark frowned, freezing on the sidewalk. "Bolt, what is it, you tired out, buddy?" But the dog refused to meet his eyes. Bolt's entire body was locked and rigid, his posture hugging the ground like a wolf stalking its prey through the snow. His ears, normally so alert and expressive, were now pinned flat against his head. The hackles along his spine rose into a jagged ridge, a primal warning system tripped by a signal Mark could not perceive. Bolt didn't move toward their front door. He didn't even glance at it. Instead, he raised his snout to the wind, taking a deep, shuddering breath, and let out a sound that sent a chill straight through Mark's soul. It wasn't a bark, but a low, vibrating growl that seemed to rumble up from the very plates of the earth. "Bolt, heel," Mark commanded, his brow furrowed in confusion. But Bolt ignored the command. For the first time in 5 years of partnership, the dog disobeyed his handler. And then he was gone. He wasn't running with the joy of a dog chasing a ball. He ran with the deadly focus of a soldier charging an enemy line. He completely ignored the manicured front lawn, vaulted past the pristine porch, and shot like a black and tan arrow for the side gate leading to the backyard and the kitchen door. "Bolt, hey." Mark tightened his grip on the presence and broke into a jog after him. "Wait up." The neighborhood was deceptively quiet. Across the street, Mrs. Higgins was just watering her petunias. She waved at Mark with a warm, oblivious smile. Mark could only manage a distracted nod, his eyes locked on his dog. Bolt had already reached the side of the house. He was at the service entrance, a simple wooden door that led right into the mudroom off the kitchen. This door was rarely for guests. It was for the family, for taking out the trash or letting the dog out. When Mark rounded the corner, he stopped cold. Bolt was savaging the door. The dog was utterly frantic. He was throwing himself onto his hind legs, clawing at the wood with desperate, sharp talons. Splinters flew as he tore at the frame. He'd drop to all fours, digging at the threshold with a high, sharp whine, then reverting to that deep, guttural growl. "Bolt down." "What in God's name is wrong with you?" Mark yelled, rushing toward him. He reached to grab the dog's thick collar, assuming he'd find a raccoon or some stray cat hiding in the nearby bushes. But Bolt violently twisted from his grasp, snapping his jaws at the doorknob. He looked back at Mark, his amber eyes wide with a terrifying intelligence. "Open it!" Those eyes screamed. "Open it, right now!" Mark froze. The hair on his arms began to prickle and stand on end. He had seen Bolt alert for narcotics, for explosives, for hidden fugitives. He knew this language of pure danger. This wasn't a drill. This was a code red alert. Mark moved closer to the door. The sun beat down warm and strangely pleasant on his neck, creating a nightmarish contrast to the ice-cold knot that was tightening in his stomach. "Lana," Mark called out, his voice shaking. "Lana, honey, are you in there?" Nothing but silence answered. He leaned in, pressing his ear against the hard wood. He was listening for the dishwasher, for jazz on the radio, even the hum of the vacuum. Instead, there was nothing. Then the smell hit him. It was faint at first, seeping through the thin gap between the door and the frame. Mark sniffed again, completely confused. He expected the warm scent of Lana's vanilla candles, or the clean lemon polish she used. This, though, struck him like a physical blow. It was a thick, cloying stench of sharp ammonia and stagnant water, the sour, undeniable odor of biological decay and unwashed flesh. It was the smell of the forgotten kennel of a crime scene, where a body has been left for far, far too long. Mark recoiled, a gag rising in his throat. "What the hell?" His heart began to hammer a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a desperate drumbeat of denial. A pipe must have burst his brain, reasoned wildly. Maybe a possum got in and died in the walls. Lana is just at the camp visiting the kids. That's it. But then Bolt unleashed a mournful howl, a sound of such pure, piercing grief and urgency that it shattered Mark's denial into a million pieces. Mark dropped the boxes. The Galactic Voyager hit the concrete, and Lullaby Lola landed face first in the dirt. He was oblivious. His hands, always so steady with a firearm, were now shaking as he dug into his pocket for his keychain. He fumbled his slick fingers, slipping on the metal. "Hang on, Bolt, just hang on." Mark muttered, his breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. He finally found the small silver key, the spare he carried for emergencies. He jammed it into the lock. It caught. He jiggled it, sweat pouring down his forehead in the mild air. Click. The deadbolt slid home. Bolt stopped his assault. He backed away a single step, his body coiled, ready to launch. Mark gripped the brass doorknob. It felt like ice in his hand. A sudden, violent wave of nausea swept over him. A terrible premonition, a deep, certain knowledge that the life he had left just 2 weeks before was completely gone. And whatever was waiting on the other side of this door was about to destroy him forever. He didn't gently push the door. He did not call out her name again. He was moved by the primal terror pouring from his dog and the horrific stench assaulting his senses. With a desperate twist, Mark threw his entire weight against the door, and as it flew inward, his entire world shattered. It wasn't the crash of thunder or the crumble of mountains that broke it. It shattered in the silence of a single heartbeat, the heavy door swinging wide to reveal the nightmare within. Mark stood frozen on the threshold, the warm spring sunlight pressing at his back, a golden wave trying to follow him into the darkness. But the light faltered at the doorframe, recoiling from the oppressive darkness that festered inside the kitchen. For a long moment, Mark's mind simply refused to compute what his eyes were seeing. It was a failsafe, a final merciful defense, a primal shield against a reality so horrific it threatened to break him. He'd expected the gleaming white marble island where he drank his coffee. He'd expected the fresh scent of lemon cleaner, the familiar hum of the fridge. But instead, a wall of stench hit him like a physical blow to the chest. It was the smell of a cage, the thick, cloying reek of ammonia, of rotting garbage, and the sharp metallic tang of pure terror. Mark took one step forward, his boots grinding on the filth-covered floor. As his eyes struggled to adjust from the brilliant day to the suffocating gloom, his gaze swept across the sealed-off space. Black plastic had been taped over every window, plunging the afternoon kitchen into an endless, suffocating twilight. And then, a flicker of movement near the floor seized his attention. "Bolt!" The name tore from his throat, a raw sound he barely recognized. But Bolt was already a blur of motion. In that instant, the magnificent German shepherd shed every ounce of his training. He wasn't a police K9 anymore. He was their guardian. He flowed across the grimy tiles like a living shadow, a silent arrow aimed for the darkness beneath the kitchen island. Mark's eyes followed his partner, and that's when he saw them. Time stopped. The air was violently stolen from his lungs, leaving him gasping as if drowning. There, huddled on a mat crusted with filth, were two little shapes. They looked like pale ghosts, like forgotten treasures left to decay in the dark. Their once bright, cheerful clothes were now just stiff, colorless rags, soiled with unimaginable grime. Their skin was almost translucent, pulled so taut over their tiny bones he could count every single rib. It was Ben and Mia, but it couldn't be them. It was impossible. These were skeletal figures from some forgotten war, not the babies he'd kissed goodbye just 2 weeks before. They were chained. A thick, heavy tow chain, the kind you'd use to pull a truck from the mud, was wrapped around the plumbing beneath the sink. It split like some metal beast, ending in 2 steel cuffs clamped tight around their small, horribly bruised ankles. The flesh around the cuffs was raw and an angry red, weeping where the cold steel had viciously gouged their skin. And on the floor, scattered among the dust and dead insects, were pieces of some kind of meat. Hot dogs. They were cold, slimy, and covered in grit. And his children, his beautiful, precious babies, were eating them. Ben clutched a piece in his shaking hands, tearing at it with the feral desperation of a starving animal. He wasn't chewing, just swallowing it whole. And Mia was on her hands and knees, licking a piece that lay on the grimy tile, her tiny tongue lapping at the filth because her hands were too weak to even lift it. No. The word was a shattered whisper of pure denial on his lips. Bolt reached them first. There was no bark, no joyous leap. He simply collapsed, dragging himself the final few feet, in a gesture of pure, heartbreaking apology. Upon reaching Ben, he started to gently lick the raw, open sores on the child's ankles, his normally coarse tongue now a soothing balm. It was unbelievably gentle, cleansing the caked blood and filth with a tenderness that belied his massive frame. A high broken whine escaped him, a sound that mourned the broken state of his young pack. Suddenly Mark's hands went numb. The same strength he used to take down criminals, to haul heavy tactical gear, the power that lifted immense weights, it all just evaporated. Crash. The boxes in his arms, the brand new Galactic Voyager Lego set, and the Lullaby Lola doll slid from his utterly paralyzed fingers. They struck the hardwood with a deafening crack, a sound that echoed like a gunshot through the silent tomb of the room, shattering the fragile moment. Mia's body jerked violently, a small frame convulsing in pure terror. The piece of hot dog she'd been clinging to fell from her hand. It rolled unnoticed into the grime. She never looked toward the noise. She didn't even look for her father. Raw instinct had taken hold, the instinct of the hunted. Scrambling backward until the chain snapped taut, she curled into a protective ball, her tiny arms wrapping over her head to shield her face. "Don't!" she shrieked, her voice a broken, raspy plea. Ben froze solid. He stopped chewing completely. The scrap of meat tumbled from his mouth. Ever so slowly, he turned his head towards the door, toward the looming silhouette framed by the blinding white light of the open doorway. His eyes were hollow, sunken pits, with dark circles that looked like bruises beneath them. They were the eyes of a battle-weary old man trapped in the face of a 5-year-old boy. With the sun at Mark's back, Ben couldn't make out his face. All he could see was a large, looming shadow, a figure of authority, a punisher. Ben didn't see his savior. He saw the monster coming back for him. The little boy scrambled to his knees. He made no move to run, no attempt to fight. Instead, he pressed his small hands together, palm to palm, in a pleading gesture no child should ever have to learn. He bowed his head, his whole body trembling so violently his teeth began to chatter. "Mommy, Lana." Ben's voice was a ragged whisper, a dry, cracking sound like crushed leaves. "I ate it all. I promise." At that, Mark felt something inside his chest physically tear apart. A pain sharper than any bullet shot straight through him. He managed a single step forward, reaching out a trembling hand. "Ben, it's me." But Ben only flinched violently at the movement. He pressed his forehead hard against the filthy tile. "Please don't put me in the dark closet. I was good. I ate dinner. Please don't hit Mia. Please, don't hit Mia. Hit me instead." The words just hung there, heavy and toxic in the stale air. Hit me instead. Mark's legs finally gave out. He didn't just fall. He crumbled. His body slammed to the ground, his knees crashing against the unforgiving tile. But he felt absolutely nothing. A scream was building deep in his throat, a primal roar of grief and fury that had no words. "Oh God," Mark finally screamed, the sound shredding his vocal cords. "My children. Oh God, no." He began to scramble forward, moving on his hands and knees, oblivious to the stench, ignoring all the filth. He crawled frantically across the floor, a desperate animal trying to reach its young. "Ben Mia, it's Daddy! It's Daddy!" he sobbed, hot, blinding tears streaming down his face as he finally reached them. He didn't care about the filth or the smell or the grime. He just scooped them up, pulling Ben tightly into his chest and gathering Mia against his neck. They were so impossibly light, like fragile bundles of dry sticks. But Ben only stiffened in his arms, utterly terrified, bracing for the inevitable strike. But then came the coarse texture of Mark's uniform, the familiar scent of rain and old spice hidden under the sweat, a smell from a lifetime ago before the darkness swallowed everything and the boy's shaking finally ceased. He leaned away, his eyes struggling to focus in the shadows. A small, grimy hand reached up, touching the scruff of Mark's beard. "Daddy," Ben breathed, the word as delicate as a whisper on glass. "I'm right here, buddy. I'm right here," Mark choked out, pulling him close and rocking him in his arms, burying his face in the tangled mess of Ben's hair. "I'm so sorry. God, I'm so sorry." Bolt nudged in, resting his heavy head on Mark's shoulder, uniting them in their shared heartbreak. The dog let loose a deep, mournful howl, a heartbreaking song of sorrow that echoed to the ceiling and filled the hollow house with the weight of their shattered lives. Ben's gaze shifted from his father's face to the cold iron on his own ankle, and finally his small body sagged against Mark's chest. The raw adrenaline that had fueled him for 2 long weeks simply vanished. His eyes fluttered shut, his tiny hand clenching Mark's shirt with a strength that starvation couldn't steal. "You came back," Ben exhaled, his voice barely a whisper. "Bolt told me you would." Mark's arms tightened his very soul, igniting with a white-hot rage he never knew he possessed. His eyes fell upon the chains that bit cruelly into his children's skin. He saw the black tape that had stolen the sunlight, and in that devastating instant the police officer in him vanished. In his place, something far more primal was born, a father who would watch the world burn just to keep his children safe. "I am never leaving you again," Mark vowed into the suffocating darkness, a promise sealed in blood and tears. "Never!" The sharp screech of metal on metal became the only sound that mattered in the entire universe. Mark moved like a man possessed. He bolted for the garage, his boots skidding across the polished hardwood floors of the hall, and returned only moments later, brandishing a pair of heavy-duty crimson bolt cutters. His breathing was a ragged, heaving storm, not from the sprint, but from the crushing weight of the fury building inside his chest. He dropped to his knees on the grimy kitchen floor, blind to the sickening smell that clung to his uniform. "Stay still now, baby. Daddy's got you. Daddy's gonna get this off," Mark promised, his voice shaking as he fit the jaws of the cutters around the steel chain shackling Ben's small ankle. Ben was perfectly still. He sat there frozen, his wide eyes locked on his father's face, as if afraid that blinking might make this miracle disappear. He clutched Mia's hand so tightly, his knuckles shone white under the layers of dirt. Mark squeezed the handles with all his might. His biceps strained the veins on his neck, popping like thick cords. Snap! The chain gave way. The heavy link hit the floor with a dead thud. Mark tossed the cutters aside, and then, ever so gently, oh so carefully, he pried the steel cuff apart. The metal released its grip, revealing raw, purpled skin that was weeping and broken. Mark recoiled, as if the pain was his own. He fought the urge to kiss the wound, to cleanse it with his own tears, but there wasn't time. "Just one more, Mia. Just one more," Mark whispered, shuffling on his knees toward his daughter. Bolt stood his ground. The German shepherd had planted himself firmly between the children and the doorway that led deeper into the house. His whining had stopped. Now there was only silence. His body was a tense statue of dark fur, his amber eyes locked on the hallway, his ears pivoting like twin radar dishes. He knew the monster wasn't gone. He was simply waiting. The very moment Mark set the cutters on Mia's chain, the sharp slam of a car door echoed from the driveway, and Mark went completely still. The heavy bolt cutters trembled in his grip. Ben whimpered a sound so small, so full of terror. "She's here. Daddy, hide me." "No." Mark's voice rumbled, dropping an octave, a deep vibration that seemed to shake the very floorboards. "We are not hiding. Not anymore." He stopped short of severing the chain. He couldn't risk the sound betraying their position. He needed her to walk into this room. He needed her cornered. Then from the hall the sound of heels began. Click, clack, click, clack. A cheerful rhythmic sound, followed by a soft melodic hum that floated through the tense air of the home, utterly oblivious to the tragedy waiting in the kitchen. The sound of a woman who had just enjoyed a beautiful afternoon, perhaps after a glass of Chardonnay, now returning to her perfect, pristine castle. "I'm home." Lana's voice trilled a sweet sing-song call. "Mark, are you here? I noticed the front door was unlocked." She had no idea his car was parked 3 blocks away. She just figured he'd forgotten to lock up. Or maybe she thought he was taking a nap. Her footsteps echoed closer. Mark rose to his feet. There was no hurry. He unfolded his 6'2" frame deliberately, like a titan rising from the very earth. He stepped over the mess of discarded hot dogs, planting himself in front of his children, his broad back a fortress completely shielding them from sight. The kitchen door swung wide open, and Lana breezed inside. She wore an elegant cream-colored silk blouse and perfectly tailored trousers. One hand clutched a designer bag, the logo of an exclusive boutique prominent. Her car keys dangled from her other hand. She stopped dead. The smile vanished from her face in an instant. Her eyes landed first on Mark. He stood firm in the center of the kitchen, his uniform caked with dirt at the knees. His face was a mask carved from stone, but his eyes, they blazed with a cold blue fire that burned like the heart of a supernova. Her gaze fell next to the bolt cutters lying on the floor, and then her eyes took in the complete chaos of the room. The scattered meat, the upended water bowl, the black tape. The shopping bag simply fell from her fingers. It landed with a soft rustle, a brand new cashmere sweater spilling out onto the filthy tiles. Every trace of color drained from her face, leaving her skin the color of old parchment. Her eyes darted everywhere, calculating, assessing a storm of panic brewing within. "Mark!" she gasped, a hand flying to her chest. She stumbled back a step, her heels unsteady. "Oh my God, you're home so early." Mark remained silent. He just watched her, his stillness more terrifying than any scream. Lana's mind, a weapon sharpened by years of manipulation, scrambled for an escape. She saw the children behind him, Ben trembling, peering around Mark's powerful leg. And then she saw the chains. She threw her hands to her face and unleashed a perfectly theatrical scream. "Oh, the horror, the horror!" Lana shrieked, tears instantly flooding her eyes. "Look at them! Look at our babies! Who could do this?" She turned her frantic gaze upon Mark, her eyes a perfect picture of manufactured confusion and rage.